Okay, CXL. Who has run a successful conversion rate test? This is not a trick question. Everybody, right? Everybody's done that. How confident are you that none of those successful tests have ever messed up your SEO performance? Because this was a successful conversion rate test. Minus 25% organic traffic. So I've been selling SEO stuff for like almost 15 years now. And recently we've been building some software, which I'll mention in a little bit in more detail. But the point is, over the last couple of years, I've spent more time on sales calls talking about our software, which enables SEO A/B testing. And I started getting this new objection on these sales calls, where people would ask me, how do we know that this work is not going to hurt our conversion rate? This was interesting, because I'd never really heard this as an objection to SEO consulting. I mean, it is, but it's not something that people bring up very often. And so that was kind of interesting. I was like, well, let me ask you a question. How do you know that your conversion rate work isn't hurting your SEO performance? Do you know? And this is the very unscientific bit. I did put out a poll on Twitter where I asked conversion rate people, I said, do you worry more that your work is going to screw up SEO performance, or do you worry more that the SEOs in your company are going to screw up your conversion rate? Everybody worries that the SEOs are going to screw up their conversion rate. That's also true in my industry. It's a bit closer, but when I asked the SEOs, they pretty much said the same thing. We worry about messing up conversion rate more than we worry about our UX and CRO teams screwing up our search performance. But I just find it weird. I find it weird how separated these, how siloed these functions are in so many organizations. How many agencies do one or do the other, and how many business units have these report to different people, have different objectives, don't measure them together. I don't know if this is familiar to you, but this is my experience, is that they're treated separately, which is weird, because that's not how our websites work. I mean, there are certainly some SEO-centric things that you might do that are pretty much irrelevant from a conversion rate perspective, right? If you're doing things to meta information that the user never sees, or you're messing with your robots.txt or something like that, that's probably not going to affect your conversion rate particularly. And similarly, there is some stuff on the other side, where if you're working deep within a checkout funnel for logged-in users only, this is probably not going to hurt your search performance. But everything else is in the middle here. Everything else is potentially affecting our search performance and user experience. So yeah, I mean, not to do another, like, here's some more stuff to worry about, we're all going to die kind of thing, but you need to worry about both. So I wrote a post over at moz.com which dug into a little bit of this from the business perspective, so you can read more of the details behind this. But everybody thinks that a CRO program looks like this, right? We do some testing. If it doesn't work, we don't roll it out. If it does work, we do roll it out, and we step up a little bit. We rinse and repeat, and every time we get a winning test, we just step up and we make more revenue, right? Yeah, that's how this works, in theory. But our experience is that there's a lot of these tests which are actually damaging from an SEO perspective. And so it's a little bit one step forward, one step back. Every so often you roll out a conversion rate win, but every so often you mess up your organic search and you get less traffic, and that means fewer conversions. So we kind of like bounce along like this. And what we really want to do is get the best of both and roll out the net wins, roll out the stuff that is good for both, and certainly avoid the things that hurt us in one way or the other. And this is why I mentioned we've been building a software platform. I don't get to pitch it from here today, but if you want to talk to me about it later, you should do that, or you can check it out at odn.distilled.net. And basically, we've been building a platform that enables us to do SEO A/B testing. So part of our mission is to make SEO, I guess, more like the stuff you do, right? We want to make it effective and accountable. We want to be able to prove it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But what this also lets us then do is build in what we call full funnel testing. So this is the idea that if you're doing conversion rate work, you know, in a really simplified funnel kind of world, you're trying to make the bottom of the funnel bigger, right? So like whatever traffic we get, let's get more people give us more money. And when I'm over with my SEO hat on, we're trying to make the top of the funnel bigger, right? We're trying to just put more people in and hope they come through at the same kind of conversion rate, and we make more money and everybody wins, yeah? Full funnel is thinking about this in just absolute amounts of output. So we're trying to say, what's the net impact? And can we make the whole funnel bigger, more in the top and more at the bottom. So we call this full funnel testing. And to really explain it to you, I need to step back a little bit and talk about SEO testing for a minute, because SEO testing is relatively new. This is a thing that we're trying to push forward, but it's probably not something that everybody's completely familiar with. So I'm going to run through a little bit of technical stuff. Oh, sorry, before I get into that. So the motivation. Why did we start doing this? Tell me if this resonates with you. My experience is that when we talk about SEO, people are like, a little bit snake oil, a little bit black box. Is it even a thing? Do you know what you're talking about? Yeah, I know. So maybe optimistically, I don't know whether we set out to debunk this or prove it, but we did some more scientific research. So I mentioned my Twitter poll earlier. This stuff is based on much larger amounts of data. We went to tons of people and got information about their level of digital marketing experience, and then also asked them some SEO questions. So we basically said, this all boiled down to, we give you a keyword, and we show you 2 pages that both rank in the top 10 for that keyword. And what I want you to do is just tell me which one outranks the other. Okay? And for the SEO professionals, we would say, you can use your tools. Okay? So you can evaluate these websites, you can take your time. The only thing you can't do is just Google the keyword, because that's cheating. But apart from that, you can do whatever you like. You can evaluate these with your analysis tools, and you can look at their backlinks, and you can do all that kind of stuff. And all I want you to do is just tell me, here's a keyword, both of these pages rank, which one ranks better? This is equivalent to being able to answer the question, what should we do to make this web page rank better? Right? If we can answer this in a generality, it's the same basic question. And unsurprisingly, when we gave this question to lay people, right, so people without digital marketing experience, they weren't great at it. They would get this right 40-something% of the time. They'd correctly determine which result ranked where. And I've run this at SEO conferences where I've actually had everybody stand up and do it live. And I guess the good news is up to 3 years experience of SEO, people were a little bit better than the layperson. If they had more than 3 years experience, they were justifying their pay rise and doing even better. But they were all getting beaten by a coin flip. This is a little bit disappointing. And so we're like, what are we going to do about this? How do we make SEO more like conversion work? How do we make it more like paid search? How do we make it more deterministic, more effective, more accountable? And this is how we got into SEO A/B testing. So how does it work? Imagine a simple website. I've got a website here. It has a site section called Animals. This site section has 4 pages within it: cats, dogs, unicorns, and badgers. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to run an SEO test on this little website. Now, in the real world, we would have to be working on a much, much bigger scale, because part of the scale that's needed for SEO testing is about number of pages. So it also relies on decent levels of traffic, just like conversion rate would, but we need lots of pages as well. So this is an example. So imagine that we have a hypothesis, and this comes from wherever you like, right? This can come from some research, some best practices, you name it. We have a hypothesis that if we change our page template like this, it's going to perform better in Google. Okay. Now, if we were running this as a conversion rate test, what we would do at this stage is we would split our audience, okay? A simple A/B test. We'd split our audience. We'd show some people the website with the old template, and we'd show some people the website with the new template, and we'd look at the performance of them. That doesn't work for SEO testing, because you'd have to put Googlebot in one box or the other. So you wouldn't be splitting anything for Googlebot. Googlebot would only see one treatment. So what we do instead of splitting the audience, we split the pages. And so we say, everybody, Google, and all of our users see one page template on some pages, in this example, cats and badgers, and a different page template on other pages. And we can then apply some somewhat similar statistical processes to the things that you're all used to in A/B testing to figure out, okay, and on average, do these pages perform better when they're modified or not? And so while the test is running, our website looks a little bit like this. We have some pages with the old template, some pages with the new template. And I'll tidy this up for you in a bit. But this is basically what it looks like during the test. And so we can compare that to during a conversion rate test where kind of every page exists in some kind of Schrodinger's cat, both states, so it's showing it to some users in one way, other users in a different way, versus the SEO test where we're just saying, OK, some pages are one way and some pages are a different way. So this is what our platform does. Our platform helps websites actually roll out changes like this and then do the statistical analysis to figure out if it's worked or not. And the output of our stats is a chart that looks a little bit like this, which you'll be vaguely familiar with similar charts. But this is essentially increase in organic traffic as a result of the change. And because it's a controlled test, because we have some pages we haven't changed, we can rule out all of the other stuff. We can rule out seasonality, site-wide changes, Google algorithm updates, competitor actions, all of those other things. We can say this is isolated. This is the uplift that came as a result of this particular SEO hypothesis change. The pale blue area, I don't know if you can see that very well at the back, there's a pale blue area on here which is the confidence interval. So we're saying we're 95% confident that the true value falls within this range of these fans. And when that crosses the axis, so which is here in this example, that's when we can say with statistical confidence that we have a winner, we have an uplift. So this is SEO with like science. So we run a bunch of these tests, pure SEO tests to start off with. And so we run a bunch of these tests, and we find some pretty surprising stuff. And I'm not going to go deep into all of the SEO things we've learned, because that's not this conference, but I'm going to just talk about one specific example which kind of overlaps, I think. So you can imagine this as an SEO hypothesis or as a UX hypothesis. And this is, who's worked on an e-commerce site, right? So you think about a category page on an e-commerce site, list of products, terrible bit of copy down the bottom, or even at the top if you're super unlucky, right? And if you're really lucky, some developer has put this in like div ID equals SEO underscore text. Yeah? Yeah? We're popular with our UX pals. And so some SEO has stuck this bit of terrible text on here, and it's clearly not meant to be read by people. It's clearly there just because, like, let's just ram some keywords on here and hope it performs a little bit better in search. So we come along and we say, you know what, Google's got pretty smart. Google's been rolling out these, who's heard of the Panda update? Who's heard of all the machine learning that Google's rolling out? Google says, let's make our websites quality. So we have a hypothesis. What if we take this text off this page? What if we come along and we say, let's just delete this, and let's just have the products, which is what people came to this page for, after all. We test it. Yes! It's only a small uplift, but it's statistically significant. We have an uplift, 3% uplift in organic search traffic as a result of removing terrible content from a category page. Yes! We're on the same team. But hang on. Before you tweet, that Will's up here on stage saying we're all on the same team and we should remove terrible content and we'll do better, we ran a very similar test on a different website and it went the other way, which is awkward. So there's a few things going on here. I just want to call your attention to a couple of things. Firstly, there's a temptation to think that the good kind of SEO, right, not the shady snake oil stuff, but the good stuff that is aligned with UX, there's a temptation to think that it's kind of a bunch of best practices. It's a bunch of rules, ways Google wants you to treat your website, and you just follow a checklist and you kind of get it right. The first thing we see is that's not necessarily true. Essentially the same change on different websites can have different results, which isn't super surprising because it's a complex ecosystem. It depends what your competitors are up to. It depends how good this content actually is. It depends how good your website is, how strong your website is, all these other things. But the point is, we have to test, just like we do when we're dealing with humans who, as you know, don't always act in the way that user research says we think they might. So that's the first thing. The second thing is sometimes we're aligned. Yeah, we're on the same team. Other times, not so much. So what do we do with this? OK, let's keep going. Let's get back to full funnel testing. So that's how SEO testing works. OK? Hopefully everybody's kept up with me on that. I know I've gone through it pretty quickly. But I want to get into the meat of this, which is the full funnel testing. So when we're doing the SEO and the CRO stuff together. So this is how that works. As far as Google is concerned, we set it up in pretty much the same way that the SEO test, the pure SEO test was. So Google comes along and it crawls, and it makes, each time it requests a page, it's essentially a new visit, right? This is how Google operates. Google doesn't accept cookies and so forth. So Google just requests each page independently. And so Google's experience is some pages have the original page template. Some pages have the hypothesis applied to them. That's how Google sees it. A user comes along, types, what do unicorns eat, lands on the unicorns page, and from an SEO perspective, we count the test as done. Right? That's a new visitor. That's an organic visitor. Cracking. Put them in the box of, that's like a vote for the version A. What we do now to make this into a full funnel test is that we give that user a cookie, and let me just flick backwards and forwards between those two slides. So what happens there is when that user gets the cookie, the other pages all become the same template as the one they landed on for that user. Okay? So now when this user who originally landed on page template A, as they browse around the site, they get that consistent site-wide experience of that page template across the entire site section. So the first thing you'll notice is this is a better kind of SEO test, because it's just like the old test, but now there's no risk of a user getting confused to seeing one page template on one page, a different page template on another page. So this is better already. But it also means we now have cohorts of users where one cohort has only seen one page template and the other cohort has only seen the other page template, and we can compare their user experience metrics as well. So we can measure those things independently. We can say, is this change good for SEO, bad for SEO? And separately, we can say, is it good for conversion rate, bad for conversion rate? And we can do the net impact. You know, overall, you know, bit of one, bit of the other. Is this a good thing? So let's kind of just think about where we're up to now. So we now know, you remember that my Venn diagram where I was talking about how an awful lot of the things that we do to websites overlap with user experience, and an awful lot of things that you do with websites overlap with Google's experience of that site as well. So already, we feel like we need to be doing more of this stuff. But there's another factor to it as well, which is that Google is pushing us in this direction. So this is my big controversial statement. When I say this at SEO conferences, I get a kind of, really? UX is a ranking factor. We can argue about this, right? But we can argue even what we mean. What I mean is how users see your website affects how well it does in Google. That's a bit less controversial, but some people still kind of disagree with me on the way I frame this. I don't really care. I could talk to you about a whole bunch of SEO stuff, right? On a scale from like things that Google admits and everybody in the industry agrees with to like stuff that is kind of wild and wacky and we can argue about on Twitter or Reddit AMA threads or whatever else. You know, there's tons of this stuff. So like Google is using click-through rate from the search results to evaluate whether a proposed algorithm update is a good one or not. They are probably doing some kind of click-through rate thing evaluation for personalization. We don't really know exactly what that means. They're definitely doing human evaluation of new proposed algorithm updates. So they're showing it to trained users and saying, does this search results page result in surfacing websites with a better UX? And this is the kind of thing I mean by UX as a ranking factor. They're certainly doing some kind of machine learning, trying to train their computers to like the same things that people like. And that feeds back into the algorithm more directly. There's some more controversial stuff. They're measuring site speed directly. Is click-through rate a direct ranking? Right? We can argue. You can come to an SEO conference if you want to dive deeper into this stuff. We run one. I think that's OK to mention there. If you want to just read up on this stuff, I gave a presentation at one of our conferences last year that I called From the Horse's Mouth, which was how to understand all the nonsense Google talks. All of the official statements, all the rumors, the patents they file, the acquisitions they make, all this kind of stuff. If you want to geek out on this stuff, do that, read that, or chat to me afterwards, because I'm happy to geek out on this, but that's not what I'm doing on stage here today. So we can be like, yes, this is fine. We're all on the same team here. Let's just do the UX testing. No, we're going to get out the Dikembe finger. No, we can't do that. We can't do that in theory or in practice right now, partly because Google's still wanting this to be true but not great at it. So this is directionally the way they're trying to go, but it's broken in all kinds of big and small ways. So I want to tell you about a couple of interesting things here. So this is a guy called Paul Ha. He's a pretty understated, soft-spoken guy who's been working on search quality at Google for like 18 years or something. His LinkedIn profile just says like Googler. But he's like one of the most important people on how they evaluate algorithm updates. And in this interview, he talked about how one of the ways that they started out trying to do this stuff was they were evaluating new algorithms. So the way it works is Google gets a quality team together to evaluate proposed changes to the algorithm. So an engineer at Google will come along and say, you know what, we should use some weird ranking factor, and it will make our search results better. And they go, yeah, I mean, sure, go test that, and bring the results back to this evaluation committee. And one of the things they used to evaluate it against was what they call next page click rate. which is how many people performing a search go to the second page of Google. And they would see that as a failure mode, right? So if they could come up with a new algorithm that had fewer people need to go to the second page, in other words, more people get what they want on the first page, they would see that as like, yes, this is what we're trying to do here. Let's roll this out to the world. Didn't work. So they got gamed by their own engineers. One of their engineers added some white space to the page. Just moved the link to page 2 further down. And I think we can agree this probably didn't make anybody happier with the results on page 1. But it did reduce the click-through rate through to the second page of search results. So Google does some dumb stuff. And they also struggle with the fact that people are confusing. Right? We had talks about the ghosts in the results, about ways we can fool ourselves with statistics and statistical data. It's hard. People are confusing. I want to tell one example of this, which is for a very long, one of the longest running experiments that Google ran, which I believe they've stopped now, but for a long, long time, they would put something like 0.2% of all traffic into a bucket where those users received search results with positions 2 and 4 switched. Okay? So instead of the results, so the algorithm goes, here's the top 4 results, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they would say, just for this small cohort of users, flip 2 and 4, so they get 1, 4, 3, 2. Okay? And this was kind of a control test for them. So this was like, if we just make these results worse, because 4 should be worse than 2, if we just make them worse, what happens? What do people do on our search results? And they had the hypothesis that more people would click on result 3, basically. Fewer people would click on the second result, which is now the 4th, right? Because this is now worse. And so the argument goes, fewer people will click on this, more people will scroll down and click on what is now better, a better result further down the page. That is not what happened. What happened is more people clicked on the first result, right? Because what they're presented with now is good result, bad result, where they used to be presented with good result, quite good result. And so they were like, this sucks, I'm just clicking on the top result. And so by making the page categorically worse, they increased the click-through rate on the top search result. And this is probably not mind-blowing to you all who are used to these kinds of tests, but this just shows you that Google is not necessarily the most sophisticated player at doing this stuff. So this means, if you want to read that, watch that interview, by the way, it's on YouTube. But there's a broader point. I don't need all of the futurist stuff. I don't need to say Google is going to do this differently in the future to make my point. And I also don't need all the tinfoil hat conspiracy theories that my industry loves. May or may not be true. Doesn't really matter. Point is, I can work off just 2 points and make a strong case here, which is, firstly, Google is absolutely using machine learning in their algorithm to have their computers rate websites better when those websites have the characteristics that humans like. Okay, so they're training the machine learning models to like the same things that people like. So that's one thing that pushes us towards UX as a ranking factor. And the second thing is that we know that they evaluate, when they have a candidate algorithm update, we know they evaluate that in both quantitative and qualitative ways to say, does this return web pages that are better for our users than the old way of doing it, right? We know they're doing these 2 things. And that means that I can talk to the SEO industry and say, we should be building more of our SEO hypotheses from UX fundamentals, right? We should be pushing our websites better, not just because it's good for users, but also because it's going to improve the top of the funnel and we're going to get more visitors as well. So we're on the same team here. So I'm going to summarize this and then give the kind of the but at the end of it. But is UX a ranking factor? Okay, I put a question mark on it at the end just to satisfy the people who might argue with me. But something like this is going on, right? Not everybody agrees with me, but I can make a pretty strong case even without the futurist stuff, even without where Google's going to be in 5 years' time, and even without the tinfoil hat conspiracy theories, that if we just accept these 2 things, that means that from an SEO perspective, we're going to need to even more often make arguments that we need to be improving the user experience. But it also means that I can come here and talk to you all, and we can start that conversation about we're changing some of the same things on these websites, people, and we need to be better on the same team, break down some of those silos. And I think that we need to be building SEO hypotheses from UX fundamentals, but I also think that what that really means is we need to be testing the impacts together, because we're changing the same parts of these websites, and sometimes that happens. And we know people worry about the other thing. I know you're worried about your SEO colleagues messing up your conversion rate, but we need to worry about the opposite as well. As I said, that was minus 25% organic traffic from a winning conversion rate test. That's why we're investing so much into what we believe is the future of SEO, right? Making it more effective and more accountable by being able to test in all these different circumstances where, as I said, it's not like a checklist. It's not like a best practice thing where you can just say, this works on this website, so it's definitely going to work on that website. We need to be testing in situ for your website versus your competitors on your keywords and so forth. And the best kind of SEO test, in my opinion, is the one that is also consistent for the users. In other words, cookies people and gives them a consistent site-wide experience, which enables full funnel testing and means that we can get back properly on the same team. So it's been a blast being here the last couple of days. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to geeking out about some of this stuff with you all later. There's some credit links at the bottom here. Some of my colleagues did actually some of the hard work behind all of this, so you should follow them as well if you're interested in this stuff. My slides are going to be available to download. It's been a blast. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, sir. We got some questions for you. Let's do some of them. Okay, so the first one is, how do you deal with sample rate mismatch?
Yeah.
If one of the templates outperforms from a ranking perspective, won't there be more people in certain variations?
Yes, so there is some, I kind of glossed over some of the stats behind this. There are some differences in the statistical treatments of what we're doing versus what you're used to doing in regular A/B testing and so forth. And we're actually applying a bunch of different techniques to handle different size sample groups, and that applies in both the conversion rate side and the SEO side. So that's probably a deeper conversation. Find me afterwards and we can get deeper into it. But we're using a lot of neural network-based models to forecast what the traffic would look like without the change. And we're doing a kind of counterfactual comparison model. We get into lots of deep stat stuff, but this is a thing we're aware of. Let's geek out about it later, probably.
Cool.
Yeah.
If users are seeing the same template on different pages, how do you avoid getting penalized by Google for duplicate content on different pages? So I think this pertains to the straight-up SEO test.
Right. So it's very important that we realize that when we're doing an SEO test, and this applies to the full funnel testing as well, but let's we can, I think, answer the question just on the SEO side. It's very important that we don't duplicate content, so we don't ever serve the same page on 2 different URLs. And it's very important that we don't cloak, which is the practice of serving Google a different page than a user, a new user would see on that page. And we don't do either of those things. So we're not doing this. When I'm talking about templates, I'm talking about the structure of the page. So I'm talking about changing things like layout, title tag structure, meta information, structured data on the page, internal linking structure, all those kinds of things. We're not saying these pages are all identical, and we're serving them on different URLs. Every page just keeps its own URL for all users.
So there is no duplicate content?
There is no duplicate. We introduce no duplicate content. That's correct.
Isn't SEO more of a long-term process? How can you run SEO tests where Google indexes the changes in a time-efficient manner to keep testing velocity up?
Yeah, great question. So there are some SEO changes that take a very long time to play out, but most on-site change, Google is getting faster and faster at this stuff, is kind of, I guess, the punchline. More and more often we see that these tests are resolved in a few weeks, and it does rely on pages getting recrawled and reindexed, absolutely. So no test is finished instantly. We never see the uplift on day one, because you have to wait for these pages to get recrawled and reindexed. But our experience is that for the vast majority of tests, or changes rather, once you've made the change, by the time it gets recrawled, by the time it gets reindexed, you're going to start seeing that uplift, if it's going to come at all. And therefore, the stats basically takes care of this. Our statistical treatment just waits until, it's very Bayesian, so it kind of waits until it finds an uplift, and that takes care of the how long does it take question.
Let's do the last one. How do you propose testing major site redesigns or overhauls?
Great question. So we've done this on a couple of customer sites. So we get into a little bit of how our platform works. Our platform deploys like a CDN, and so it's making server-side changes, essentially. So it's like a CDN that can modify the HTML on the way through. But it can also modify the HTTP request or response. And so the way we've done this is we've said, take the control group and continue serving them on the old template from the old servers. And then take a sample of pages and either send them to a different origin server, and so those serve the new page template, or we send an extra HTTP header, X variant group or something, and have the server configured to return the new page template if we receive that header. And that means that we can essentially do this same kind of testing, but where the whole thing is different. And when we combine that with the cooking, the full funnel testing, so some users see the old experience and some users see the new experience. Google sees a split of old and new. There is some confounding stuff going on here, and we can definitely debate, like, what does Google think when it sees one template on half a website, and what does it think when it sees a different template on the rest of the website? Again, we're getting deep into the details, but that's fundamentally how we're approaching that stuff.
Awesome. Thank you very much for being here, Will.
Thank you.